I gained a few pounds before my wedding, and the dress of my dreams, the one that celebrated our victory, simply didn't fit. On the morning of the ceremony, the despair was palpable as I wore an old, simple gown. When my fiancé saw me, with tears of shame and frustration in my eyes, he didn't say a word about the dress. Instead, what he did was a silent gesture of affection and devotion that made me feel more loved than ever. Hello, my friends. I am Linda, and this is Linda Love Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. Eleanor Hayes, or simply Ellie as everyone knew her, was sitting on the edge of the bed contemplating her image in the room's oval mirror. Through the reflection, she could see the champagne silk dress hanging on the closet door, untouched, like an unfulfilled promise. The tag from the exclusive store still swung on the strap, reminding her of the value she had invested in it, not just financial, but emotional. At 58, Ellie never imagined she would be preparing for a wedding again. Her life had followed a predictable course after her first husband, Richard, passed away a few years ago. She had immersed herself in work, cared for her already adult children from a distance, and found comfort in the routine and books that had always been her faithful companions. The emerald green dress she now wore was not what she had planned for this day. It was an old dress, with soft fabric and a simple cut, which she had kept for formal occasions. It didn't have the delicate shine nor the elegant drape of the champagne wedding dress she had bought weeks ago, but it was the only option left. Ellie sighed, adjusting the pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother. The small milky spheres, slightly yellowed with time, contrasted with the green of the dress. Her fingers trembled as she tried to fasten the clasp. The mirror did not lie. The extra pounds she had gained in recent months were there, evident in the places where the fabric fit less loosely than before. It wasn't just stress or age, it was the result of sleepless nights, hurried meals in the hospital corridors, and neglecting herself while all her energy was focused on someone else. Charles Miller had re-entered Ellie's life unexpectedly 5 years ago, during an event in that small town. They had both attended the same school in the small town where they grew up, but their paths had diverged after graduation. Charlie had gone off to college for engineering in another state, while Ellie had stayed in the town, married her high school sweetheart, and built a peaceful life. At the party, Charlie was alone, also a widower for almost 10 years. Ellie still remembered the moment she recognized him in the hall. Time had been generous with him, grey hair at the temples and expression lines that added character to his face, yet he still had the same warm smile and attentive blue eyes she remembered from their adolescence. "Ellie Hayes, is that you?" he asked, coming closer. "Charles Miller," she replied, feeling an involuntary smile forming. "It's been a long time." The conversation flowed naturally, as if the decades hadn't passed. They discovered common ground in their stories of loss, renewal, and the joys and challenges of raising children alone. They exchanged numbers at the end of the night, just as old friends who promised to stay in touch. But what started with occasional messages and sporadic coffees evolved into weekly dinners and long walks through the city park. 6 months after reconnecting, Charlie invited her to dinner with his family. In everyone's eyes, they were already a couple. Even though they were older, things progressed naturally. On the first anniversary of their reunion, Charlie invited her to live with him. There was no formal marriage proposal. Both felt that, at that stage of life, what mattered was companionship, camaraderie, and the comfort of having someone to share their days with. The ring would come later, when they least expected it, and for reasons they could never have imagined. Life with Charlie was peaceful and filled with small, everyday joys. Ellie loved the way he made coffee every morning, always leaving a cup ready for her before heading out on his morning walk. He appreciated how she organized his books and work documents, bringing order to his professional life. Evenings were spent talking about their children, planning small trips, or simply watching old movies on the comfortable living room sofa. The passion between them was serene, marked by gentle touches and prolonged kisses, a mature love that did not need grand gestures to assert itself. It was on one of these quiet nights that Charlie felt the first twinge of pain. Initially, both attributed it to the effort of carrying boxes to the attic that afternoon. 2 weeks later, when the pain persisted, and he began to notice a swelling in the neck area, Ellie insisted they see a doctor. The diagnosis came like a storm on a clear day. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, stage 3. Aggressive, treatable, but the road would be arduous. "We'll face this together," Ellie promised, holding his hand as the oncologist explained the treatment plan. Charlie nodded, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "You don't have to go through this, Ellie. I would understand if you—" She silenced him with a gentle kiss. "I chose to go through everything with you, Charlie. In sickness and in health, remember? Even without a signed paper." The following months were a blur of medical appointments, chemotherapy sessions, devastating side effects, and sleepless nights. Ellie learned to manage medications, recognize signs of infection, and prepare meals that he could tolerate on the worst days. She became an expert at turning the house into a warm and safe environment for a compromised immune system. During this period, her own health and well-being took a back seat. Lunches were often forgotten, and dinner often consisted of the leftovers from the meal she prepared for Charlie. Exercise was limited to walking through hospital corridors, and sleep was interrupted to check his temperature during the night. When, after 14 months of battle, the doctor finally uttered the words, "complete remission," they both cried as they embraced in the office. Life had been returned to them, a second chance they hadn't expected to receive. "Marry me, Ellie," Charlie said that night after they returned home. There was no ring, no kneeling on the ground, just the sincerity in his eyes as he held her hands. "I want to celebrate this victory by making you officially my wife. I want the whole world to know that I chose you to share the rest of my life, whether it be long or short." Ellie did not hesitate. "Yes," she replied with tears in her eyes. "Yes, to all the days we will have." Now, 5 months after that moment, the big day had arrived. The ceremony would be modest, just close family and a few intimate friends gathered in the garden of the house they shared. They didn't need extravagance. What they were celebrating was much greater than any party could represent. But for Ellie, the dress was important. She had carefully chosen the champagne-coloured model with its elegant cut and delicate fabric. It was a symbol of the new phase, of victory over the illness, of the celebration of life. When she tried it on in the store, she felt radiant, a sensation she hadn't felt in a long time. 5 days before the wedding, when she tried it on again, disappointment came. The zipper stopped halfway up her back, refusing to go further. She tried, took a deep breath, but there was no denying it. The months of worry and neglect of herself had taken their toll. A few extra pounds made all the difference in that specific model. Ellie tried 2 trusted seamstresses in town, but the response was that it was too close to the date and that the fabric was too delicate. The wedding was in 5 days, and she was without a dress. It was then she remembered the emerald green dress she kept in the back of the closet, a piece she had worn to formal dinners and special events. It wasn't a wedding dress, but it was elegant, and most importantly, she knew it would fit. Sitting in front of the mirror on the morning of the wedding, Ellie felt the weight of disappointment. It wasn't vanity. It was the feeling of having let herself down after having been so strong for Charlie. The new dress represented a new beginning, a milestone in the journey they had travelled together. The fact that it didn't fit seemed like a cruel reminder of everything she had sacrificed in the process. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't notice when Charlie entered the room. He stopped at the door, watching her in silence. Even from behind, he could read her body language, the slumped shoulders, the head slightly tilted in resignation. "Ellie," he called softly. She turned, surprised, and quickly tried to smile. "Charlie, you're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. It's bad luck." He approached slowly, his steps still a bit hesitant, a reminder of the battle they had won. "I think we've already faced all the bad luck we could in a lifetime," he replied with a gentle smile. His eyes briefly shifted to the champagne dress hanging in the closet before returning to look at Ellie. "You look beautiful." Ellie shook her head, unable to hide the frustration. "It's not the dress I wanted to wear today. It's not what we had planned." Charlie sat beside her on the edge of the bed and took her hands in his. Her hands were still a little shaky, a side effect of the treatment that might never completely go away. "Ellie, you're wearing the green dress," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "Do you know what it reminds me of?" She looked at him, confused. "What?" "It reminds me of the night you said yes when I asked you if we could live together. You were wearing this dress at that dinner. It was that night, seeing you in this green, that I knew I had found my home again." Ellie's eyes filled with tears. She remembered that night, the Italian restaurant downtown, the soft music, the unexpected and sincere proposal. But she never imagined Charlie would remember the dress she wore. He noticed that some of the small fabric buttons on the back of the dress were not fastened, a difficult task for someone to do alone. Without saying anything, he got up and positioned himself behind her. With delicacy, he began to button each button, one by one. His hands worked slowly, still not fully recovered from the weakness caused by chemotherapy. The effort was visible, but he continued, determined. It was a simple gesture, but loaded with meaning, a complete reversal of the roles they had played over the past year. She had dressed, bathed, and fed him on days when he barely had the strength to get out of bed. Now, he was dressing her for their wedding, restoring her dignity at a moment when she felt most vulnerable. When he finished, he sat back down beside her and noticed the silent tears streaming down Ellie's face. With the handkerchief from his jacket pocket, he gently wiped them away. "I know it was important to you, but the new dress was just a piece of clothing, Ellie," he said, looking deeply into her eyes. "Our marriage isn't about silk and perfect fit. It's about the yes we gave each other when things were toughest. It's about how you didn't leave my side when I even wanted to give up. It's about how together we are stronger than any challenge life can throw at us." He cupped her face in his hands. "What I love about you fit perfectly into my life, Ellie. Every pound, every wrinkle, every sleepless night you spent taking care of me, all of it is part of the extraordinary woman I am marrying today, and there is no dress in the world that can adequately represent how precious you are to me." Ellie couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotion. Instead, she leaned forward and kissed him softly, a kiss that carried gratitude, love, and promise. When they separated, Charlie smiled and stood up, extending his hand to her. "Now, my bride, let's go outside. We have a whole life to celebrate." Ellie took his hand and stood up. She glanced quickly in the mirror, the emerald green dress, her mother's pearls, and now her face lit up by a genuine smile. It might not have been the dress of her dreams, but she was adorned in something far more valuable. The unconditional love of a man who saw her beyond appearances, who recognized her strength, and who celebrated every part of her, exactly as she was. Hand in hand, they left the room towards the garden, where friends and family awaited to witness not just a formal union, but the celebration of two lives that had found, in maturity, and after so much pain, a second chance to love and be loved. In the emerald green dress she hadn't planned to wear, Ellie had never felt so beautiful. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 5 to show how much you liked it. Also, watch the video that is now appearing on your screen. See you soon.